The Hazari fleet scattered in flames as the merciless Zorgon warships carved through their formation, like ravenous beasts shredding prey. Commander Murloc gripped the armrests of his command chair, his knuckles whitening, as he watched another of his cruisers vanish in a blinding fireball on the view screen. Sweat poured down his ridged brow. Their defenses crumbled by the moment against the unrelenting Zorgon assault. Murloc had always known the Hazari were locked in a war for survival against the ruthless Zorgon Empire and their endless armada. For centuries, his people had held the line, fighting tooth and claw to defend their shrinking territories from a foe intent on subjugating the galaxy. But now, despite all their vaunted technology and battle prowess, Murloc could see the end approaching like a dark storm on the horizon. His fleet, once the pride of the Hazari Star Command, now lay in ruins around him. The twisted wreckage of destroyers and frigates spiraled lifelessly through the void. Over 100 ships lost in mere minutes. 10,000 lives snuffed out. Yet the Zorgons kept coming, their vessels emerging from the roiling subspace rifts like demonic serpents. Murloc slammed a fist on his console. "All ships retreat! Fall back to the homeworld!" His voice rang with desperate authority across the comm. They had to salvage what they could, warn the High Council that their defenses had failed. The Zorgons would not be far behind. The remnants of the once proud Hazari fleet limped away from the smoldering battlefield. Only a handful of battered vessels remained, trailing atmosphere from gaping hull breaches. Murloc's own ship shook violently as Zorgon plasma blasts pummeled its faltering shields. Sparks erupted from overloaded circuits. Acrid smoke choked the bridge. Beside him, Murloc's first officer, a young Hazari named Jorik, looked up from his flickering display, despair etched on his face. "Commander, the Valiant, she's gone. No survivors." His voice cracked on the final word. Murloc felt a stab of anguish. The Valiant had been their last line of defense, a mighty dreadnought bristling with the most advanced weapons the Hazari could muster. And now it was just another husk drifting among the stars. "Set course for Hazaria Prime," Murloc ordered grimly, his heart heavy with the weight of defeat. "Maximum FTL burn." As the ragged fleet accelerated into the swirling vortex of warp space, Murloc couldn't shake the sinking feeling that he was leading them on a funeral march. The Hazari had fought valiantly for generations, but in the face of the Zorgons' inexorable advance, it seemed their struggle had been for naught. How could they hope to prevail against an enemy that outgunned and outnumbered them at every turn? Yet even as despair threatened to engulf him, Murloc vowed not to let their sacrifices be in vain. Somehow, some way, they would find a way to victory, or die trying. The Hazari would never submit to Zorgon tyranny. But unbeknownst to Murloc, even as the High Council convened in somber emergency session, and he prepared to deliver the grim tidings of their impending doom, the seeds of an impossible hope were already being sown. In the grand assembly hall of the Hazarian capital, a hush fell over the gathered counselors as an urgent transmission crackled across the view screen. The haggard face of a being unlike any they had encountered before filled the display. Short and furless, with curious rounded ears, the alien spoke in halting but passable Hazari. "Greetings, people of Hazaria. I am Captain David Taylor of the Earthship Endeavor." The human's voice was calm but urgent. "I come bearing news of vital importance to your war effort." Murloc stepped forward, his brow furrowed. Humans? He had never heard of such a species, but the unfamiliar being's next words sent a jolt through him. "We have located the hidden supply base that fuels the Zorgon's military machine," Taylor declared, transmitting a set of coordinates. "And we propose a joint operation to strike at their heart." The counselors erupted into astonished murmurs. A daring raid on the Zorgon's critical weak point. It seemed too good to be true. Many voiced skepticism at trusting these strange newcomers from an uncharted sector. But Murloc studied the human captain's intense eyes, seeing there a fierce determination that matched any Hazari warrior. Though these Terrans looked primitive beside his people's sleek ships and gleaming cities, he sensed in them an unbreakable fighting spirit, a will to survive and triumph against all odds. And in that moment, Murloc knew this was an opportunity they could not afford to squander. He stepped forward and met Taylor's eyes across the flickering transmission. "Captain Taylor, the Hazari accept your offer." His words rang with resolute finality. "We will fight alongside you to the bitter end." As the Council drafted hasty plans for the joint offensive, a fragile ember of hope kindled in Murloc's chest. The war was far from over, and perhaps, with these indomitable humans at their side, the Hazari might yet snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. All hung in the balance. Murloc extended a scaled hand to clasp Taylor's five-fingered one in a warrior's grip as the transmission ended. A strange gesture, but one weighted with the promise of alliance in the face of annihilation. The battle to come would decide the fate of galaxies. As the flickering transmission ended, Murloc turned to face the assembled Hazari Council. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as the gravity of their situation sank in. This alliance with the humans was a high-stakes endeavor, but it was all they had left. "We move immediately," Murloc announced. "Prepare the fleet for departure." Within hours, Murloc found himself aboard the human vessel Endeavor, marveling at its alien design. Captain Taylor led him to a briefing room where several humans stood waiting. "Commander Murloc, meet my core team," Taylor said. He gestured to a tall, serious-looking man. "This is Commander Roberts, my XO." Roberts gave a curt nod. Next was a wiry woman with short-cropped hair. "Lieutenant Finn, our ace pilot." Finn flashed a cocky grin. Finally, Taylor introduced a burly man with grease-stained hands. "And Sergeant Hawkins, Chief Engineer Extraordinaire." As Murloc observed the humans, he noted their obvious competence and the easy rapport between them. Despite their alien appearance, he sensed a familiar warrior spirit. "Now," Taylor said, activating a holographic display, "let's talk strategy." The joint fleet set out, a ragtag armada of Hazari and human ships bound for the remote asteroid field concealing the Zorgon base. As they traveled, Lieutenant Finn led recon flights in nimble scout craft, weaving through the asteroid belt to gather intelligence. Finn's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, we've got a problem. The base is ringed with sentry drones, nasty ones too. Enough firepower to shred our fleet before we get close." Taylor frowned, studying the tactical readouts. "A frontal assault is suicide," he muttered. Murloc growled in frustration. "Then what hope do we have?" Taylor's eyes lit up. "What if we didn't have to fight our way in?" He turned to Hawkins. "Sergeant, how's that experimental cloaking device coming along?" Hawkins scratched his beard. "She's temperamental, but she'll hold." "Why?" "Because," Taylor said, a sly grin spreading across his face, "we're going to use it to slip right past those defenses." He outlined his audacious plan, using the cloaking device to infiltrate a small team into the heart of the Zorgon base. Once inside, they'd sabotage the defenses from within, allowing the main fleet to mop up. Murloc listened intently, his scales filled with excitement. It was insanely risky, but it just might work. "I'll lead the infiltration team myself," he declared. Taylor nodded. "We'll go in together." As Hawkins and the Hazari engineers worked feverishly to integrate the cloaking technology, the rest of the fleet prepared for battle. The night before the attack, Taylor visited Murloc in his quarters. Murloc poured 2 glasses of potent Hazari whiskey. "To victory," he rumbled, raising his glass. "To survival," Taylor replied. As they drank, they swapped stories of past battles and fallen comrades. Taylor spoke of Earth, so far away. Murloc described his homeworld, now threatened by the Zorgon menace. "We're not so different, you and I," Taylor mused. Murloc nodded solemnly. "We both fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." The next day, as the fleet approached the edge of the asteroid field, tension ran high. The Endeavor, cloaked and carrying its precious cargo of infiltrators, slipped silently past the Zorgon sentries. Murloc's hearts pounded as they docked with the station. This was it, their one shot at turning the tide. The boarding party moved swiftly through the corridors, subduing the few guards they encountered. They reached a computer terminal, and Murloc set to work hacking the defense grid. Suddenly, alarms blared. They'd triggered some hidden failsafe. "We've been made," Taylor shouted as Zorgon troops poured into the chamber. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as the infiltration team fought desperately. Taylor and his squad provided covering fire while Murloc worked frantically to disable the defenses. "How much longer?" Taylor yelled, ducking as a bolt scorched the wall beside him. "Almost there!" Murloc growled, his claws flying over the alien controls. A plasma bolt grazed Taylor's arm and he hissed in pain, but he kept firing, buying Murloc precious seconds. Just as it seemed the Zorgons would overwhelm them, Murloc let out a triumphant roar. "It's done!" The base's shields flickered and died. Taylor keyed his comm. "All ships, attack now!" From their position inside the crumbling station, Taylor, Murloc, and their battered team watched in awe as the Allied fleet unleashed hell upon the Zorgon base. Explosions bloomed silently in the void of space as the installation was reduced to twisted debris. Murloc turned to Taylor, his eyes shining with fierce joy. "We did it," he breathed. "We've struck the first real blow against the Zorgons." Taylor nodded, clutching his injured arm. "It's only the beginning," he said, "but together, we might just have a chance." As they made their way back to the Endeavor, both Human and Hazari knew that the real war was just beginning. But for the first time in years, hope burned bright in their hearts. The acrid smell of burned circuitry filled the Endeavor's bridge as Captain Taylor surveyed the battered fleet on his view screen. Sparks erupted from a damaged console nearby, but he paid them no heed. His eyes locked with Commander Murloc's across the flickering holo display. "We can't let up now," Taylor said, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. "The Zorgons are reeling. We need to press our advantage before they can regroup." Murloc nodded, his scaled face set with fierce dedication. "Agreed, but our forces are decimated. We need reinforcements." Taylor's mind raced. "I have an idea. There are human mining colonies not far from here. Tough bastards who know how to fight and fly in tight spaces." Murloc's eyes narrowed skeptically. "Miners? Against Zorgon warships?" "Trust me," Taylor said. "These folks can retrofit anything that flies into a combat vessel, and they hate the Zorgons as much as we do." After a moment's hesitation, Murloc relented. "Very well, make the call." Within hours, a motley assortment of armed freighters and transports joined the fleet. Their hulls bore scorch marks and hasty weapon mounts, but the grit of their crews was evident as they fell into formation. Taylor turned to his team. "All right, people, we're going in hot. Our target is the Zorgon shipyards. Without it, they can't replenish their losses." Lieutenant Finn cracked her knuckles. "Just point me at him, Captain." As they pushed deeper into enemy space, Taylor's commandos joined forces with Murloc's shock troops. They struck fast and hard, taking out Zorgon outposts in lightning raids. On one such mission, Taylor crouched behind a half-destroyed console as plasma bolts sizzled overhead. Sergeant Hawkins cursed as he returned fire. "We're pinned down," Hawkins shouted. "Can't reach the nav buoy controls." Suddenly, the air filled with the screech of Zorgon engines. Taylor's blood ran cold as he saw the sleek shapes of Zorgon interdictors descending. "It's a trap!" he yelled into his comm. "Fall back!" But there was nowhere to go. The Zorgons had them surrounded, their weapons cutting off every avenue of escape. Taylor gritted his teeth, preparing for a last stand. Then Murloc's voice crackled over the comm. "Brace yourselves!" The world exploded into fire and debris as Murloc's ship unleashed its full arsenal on their position. The barrage obliterated friend and foe alike, but it shattered the Zorgon siege. As the dust settled, Taylor stumbled to his feet, ears ringing. Bodies lay strewn across the scorched ground, human, Hazari, and Zorgon alike, but they'd broken through. Back aboard the Endeavor, Taylor and Murloc pored over tactical displays. The shipyards loomed ahead, jam-packed with defenses. Zorgon reinforcements were inbound. "We're out of time," Murloc growled. "If we don't strike now, we'll lose our chance." Taylor studied the readouts, an audacious plan forming. What if we split our forces? My ship and a few of your raiders can act as decoys, draw their fire. Meanwhile, the rest of the fleet can punch through using that asteroid field for cover. Murlock's eyes widened. You'd be torn to shreds. Maybe, Taylor said, but it's our only shot. After a long moment, Murlock clasped Taylor's hand. Then let us hope your human luck holds, my friend. As the fleet prepared for the assault, Taylor addressed his crew one last time. The faces before him were a mix of human and Hazari, united in common cause. I won't lie to you, he said. This is going to be ugly. But what we do here today will echo across the stars. For Earth, for Hazaria, for every world threatened by Zorgon tyranny, we fight. A cheer went up, and then all hell broke loose. The void erupted with weapons fire as ships clashed in a frenzied melee. Taylor's decoy force darted and weaved, drawing the brunt of the Zorgon defenses. Meanwhile, the main fleet threaded its way through the asteroid field, human pilots showcasing their vaunted skills as they dodged debris and enemy fire alike. Explosions bloomed silently in the vacuum as boarding parties launched desperate assaults on Zorgon vessels. The shipyard's superstructure buckled under the onslaught as the Allies threw everything they had into the breach. Taylor's hands flew over his controls, juking the Endeavor through a hail of plasma bolts. His ship shuddered as a near miss grazed their shields. But still, they pressed on, buying time for their comrades to strike the killing blow. The fate of galaxies hung in the balance as the battle raged on. The Endeavor limped through space, its hull scarred and engines sputtering. Captain Taylor stood on the bridge, his face grim as he watched the tactical display. The blinking lights representing Zorgon reinforcements grew ever closer. Status report, he barked. Lieutenant Finn's fingers flew over her console. Engines at 30% capacity, sir. We can't outrun them. Taylor's eyes hardened. He keyed the ship-wide comm. All hands, prepare for emergency jump. This is going to be rough. The Endeavor shuddered as it tore into warp space, the damaged engines straining to their limit. When they emerged, the shipyards were far behind them. Back at the forward base, Taylor surveyed the grim faces of his officers. Commander Roberts handed him a data pad. Casualty report, sir, Roberts said quietly. Taylor scrolled through the names, each one a punch to the gut. So many good people lost. He paused at a familiar name. Lieutenant Chen, one of his best pilots. Gone. Murlock's gravelly voice cut through the somber silence. We cannot hold this position, Taylor. Our supplies dwindle by the hour. Taylor nodded, his mind racing. Gather the War Council. We need a new strategy. In the cramped briefing room, Taylor laid out his plan. A warp jump to the Epsilon sector. There's a planet rich in thorium deposits, exactly what we need to resupply. Murlock's scales rippled with skepticism. A perilous journey, even at full strength. It's our only shot, Taylor countered. He turned to Roberts. I need you here, leading hit-and-run strikes to keep the Zorgons off balance. Roberts straightened. We'll make them bleed for every inch, sir. As the Endeavor prepared for its desperate mission, Taylor watched his crew work with grim efficiency. They knew the stakes. Weeks later, Taylor stood in the sweltering heat of an alien world, overseeing the mining operation. The air shimmered with the heat of fusion cutters as they carved out chunks of precious thorium. His comm crackled. Captain, incoming transmission from Commander Roberts. Taylor's heart raced as he listened to the report. Roberts and Murlock had been running the Zorgons ragged, but the enemy was adapting. Time was running out. Load up everything we've got, Taylor ordered. We make our stand at the shipyards. The journey back was tense, every moment bringing them closer to what might be their final battle. As they dropped out of warp, Taylor's breath caught in his throat. The shipyards loomed before them, swarming with Zorgon ships. But there, weaving through the chaos, were the battered remnants of Robert's forces. All ships engage, Taylor shouted. This is it, people. Make it count. The void erupted in a storm of weapons fire. Human and Hazari ships dove into the fray, their newly forged missiles striking true. On the ground, Murloc led a relentless assault, his troops pushing through breached fortifications. Taylor gripped his chair as the Endeavor shook from a near miss. "Finn, take us in. We're going for the core." The ship plunged down the accelerator shaft, alarms blaring. Taylor's eyes never left the targeting computer. "Now," he yelled. The Endeavor's payload streaked towards the reactor. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the world turned white as the core ruptured. As the light faded, Taylor saw Zorgan ships fleeing in disarray. On the comms, he heard Murloc's triumphant roar. They'd done it. The shipyards were theirs. Destroyed. A turning point in the war, but at a staggering cost. As the dust settled, Taylor surveyed the wreckage through the Endeavor's view screen. Twisted metal and debris floated silently in the void, remnants of friend and foe alike. He hardened his eyes, pushing down the grief that threatened to overwhelm him. "Status report," he barked, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders. Lieutenant Finn's fingers flew over her console. "Shields at 18%, sir. Multiple hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. Engineering reports the port engine is offline." Taylor nodded grimly. "What about the rest of the fleet?" "Heavy losses, sir," Finn replied, her voice tight. "But we've secured the shipyards." As if on cue, Murloc's face appeared on the main screen. The Hazari commander looked as battered as Taylor felt, his scales singed and caked with dried blood. "We've done it, my friend," Murloc rumbled. "But we cannot rest. Our scouts report Zorgon reinforcements are already on their way." Taylor's mind raced. They couldn't withstand another assault in their current state. "We need to fortify our position. How quickly can we get these shipyards operational?" Murloc bared his teeth in a fierce grin. "My engineers are already at work. We'll have the first captured Zorgon ships ready for action within hours." Over the next few days, the shipyards buzzed with frantic activity. Human and Hazari worked side by side, repairing damaged systems and repurposing Zorgon technology. Taylor watched from a makeshift command center as the first wave of retrofitted ships took flight. But their reprieve was short-lived. Alarms blared as the long-range sensors lit up with incoming contacts. "Multiple Zorgon fleets detected," a young ensign reported, his voice cracking. "They're converging from all directions." Taylor's blood ran cold as he studied the tactical display. The sheer number of enemy ships was staggering. Even with their newly acquired vessels, they were hopelessly outnumbered. He keyed his comm. "Murloc, we need to talk now." Minutes later, they stood before a holographic projection of the incoming Zorgon armada. The mood in the room was grim as Taylor and Murloc's battered staff pored over the data. "We can't hold this position," Commander Roberts said, voicing what they all knew. "Not against those numbers." Taylor's mind raced, searching for a solution. They couldn't abandon the shipyards, not after everything they'd sacrificed to take them, but a conventional defense would be suicide. He straightened, a plan forming. "We're not going to defend," he said, his voice cutting through the murmur of worried voices. "We're going to attack." All eyes turned to him. Murloc's scales rippled with interest. "Go on," the Hazari commander growled. Taylor outlined his strategy, pointing to key positions on the holographic map. "We form an armored spearhead and punch through their lines. Hit-and-run attacks, constant movement. We keep them off balance, split their forces." "It's risky," Roberts said, frowning. "We'll be leaving the shipyards exposed." "It's our only shot," Taylor countered. "If we can disrupt their offensive, bog them down in a series of smaller engagements, we might have a chance." Murloc nodded slowly. "A bold strategy. My people have a saying, 'The best defense is to make your enemy defend.' I approve." As the others filed out to prepare, Murloc held Taylor back. For a moment, the two leaders stood in silence, the weight of what was to come heavy between them. "This may be our last stand," Murloc said quietly. Taylor met his gaze. "Then let's make it one for the history books." No more words were needed. They clasped arms, a silent promise passing between them. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. As the first wave of Zorgon ships appeared on the horizon, Taylor stood on the Endeavor's bridge. His crew worked with grim efficiency, readying weapons and plotting courses. "All ships, form up," he ordered. "Prepare to execute attack plan Alpha on my mark." The combined human and Hazari fleet surged forward, a gleaming arrowhead of defiance against the overwhelming Zorgon force. As they closed the distance, Taylor allowed himself one last glance at the shipyards they were leaving behind. "For Earth," he whispered, "for Hazaria, for freedom." Then he gave the order, and the void erupted in fire as the Allies crashed into the startled Zorgon vanguard. The battle for the future of the galaxy had begun.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.